Hello, David Ansara here of the Centre for Risk Analysis. We are a think tank based in South Africa with a global perspective, and we help you to understand the risks in the current environment, to prepare for an uncertain future, and to prosper tomorrow. Today, we're looking at the issue of violent protest in South Africa. And joining me to discuss this topic is Gerbrandt van Heerden, an analyst in the CRA team. Gerbrandt, welcome.
Hello, David.
Now, Gerbrandt, you've been doing quite a lot of research into protests more broadly in South Africa, and certainly it seems that anecdotally, the number of protests are going up. But what does the data say on this?
Yes, so when we look at crowd-related incidents, or more commonly known as protests, there has been a decline since the 2010-11 period. In the last 10 years, protests overall have declined by 3%. However, when we break protests down into peaceful protests and more violent protests, the story looks a little bit different. Peaceful protests have in the last 10 years declined by 27%, whereas violent protests have skyrocketed by 270%. So in other words, yes, protests, the number of protests are down, but protests in South Africa are becoming more violent. And I think that speaks to the ever-growing frustration that South Africans have and the effects of the pandemic and the lockdown. The Institute of Security Studies has actually tracked the number of protests since the lockdown was implemented by the end of March. And what they saw was a rapid increase in protests between April of this year until July. In fact, in the month of April, there were around 50 protests occurring, and then by July, or in the month of July, more than 200 protests were occurring. So yes, the lockdown has definitely worsened the situation for many South Africans, and therefore we've seen even a more rapid increase in disruptions.
Okay, so there was already a trend towards increasing violence in terms of protest action, but now we're also seeing that COVID-19 and the lockdown has acted as an accelerant. So what other issues or burning points are people protesting about? What is causing this wave of discontent?
Well, for many years, one of the main reasons for protest was service delivery. In many parts of South Africa, especially poorer communities and more rural areas, basic service delivery is substandard. And that is why we saw in 2019 major disruptions take place in Alexandra, where people were demanding for Herman Mashaba, which was then the mayor of Johannesburg, to meet them personally. And those disruptions spread throughout the rest of the country to Khayelitsha, Hammanskraal, Kroonstad, Welkom. But during the lockdown, and as you've said, the lockdown has acted or has accelerated the declining socioeconomic circumstances of South Africans. And we've seen one of the main issues during the lockdown, why protests were occurring, were the policing of lockdown regulations, labor-related concerns, access to electricity, and then, of course, municipal services. So those were the four main reasons why people took to the streets to protest.
Yes, and obviously, as Eskom's capacity declines, they're struggling with operational and financial issues. That is going to feed into that cycle. All right, Gerbrandt, well, I think a final point from you that I'd like to hear about is, what do you think this suggests about the political culture in South Africa? Why are people turning to extra parliamentary means to have their voice heard, to get themselves noticed? What is the kind of underlying implication of this trend?
Yes, I think what these trends show us is that people are increasingly losing confidence in the electoral process. We've seen especially younger people not going to the voter ballot. In 2019, for example, only half of those aged 20 to 29 years of age actually registered to vote. We've seen voter turnout between the 2014 national election and last year's election decline rapidly. But at the same time, and as we've discussed now, violent protests have increased sharply. So people are rather resorting to protests on the street to get noticed. They think that is a better way to, for example, get more media coverage, and also protests are a lot more harder to ignore by authorities. And so the idea that people are becoming less politically engaged because voter turnout is declining with every election, that's not necessarily true. People are still politically engaged, but they're now doing their political participation in the streets rather than at the voter ballot.
All right, Gerbrandt. Well, I think that that's some very interesting analysis. And this is the kind of research that we at the Center for Risk Analysis conduct. And we share the results of this research in our reports and our regular briefings as well, exclusively to CRA clients. So if you would like to take advantage of the CRA subscription offering, we're currently running a 30-day free trial where you can get access to all of our insights and analysis there. There is a link in the description below if you would like to take us up on this opportunity. And for those of you watching, please remember, give this video a like and subscribe to the CRA YouTube page for more daily insights and analysis. That's it from me, David Ansara. Gerbrandt, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.